The mountain was burning, and Ethan Cole had just made the kind of decision that gets people killed. Smoke choked the sky black, flames roared through hundred-year pines like they were kindling, and every instinct he'd honed as a volunteer rescuer screamed at him to turn back. But 30 yards ahead, barely visible through the haze, a woman lay trapped beneath fallen timber with a shattered ankle and eyes that had already accepted death. She'd told him to leave, told him his son needed him more than she did, told him the math was simple. One life wasn't worth two. Ethan tightened the straps on his pack and kept walking toward her anyway, because some equations don't balance on paper, and some choices define who you are when everything else burns away. If you want to see how far courage can carry two people when the world is on fire, stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The dispatcher's voice had been calm when she'd told Ethan Cole that all personnel were accounted for and the evacuation was complete. That was 40 minutes ago, before the wind shifted and turned the Silver Ridge wildfire from a manageable threat into a living nightmare that jumped containment lines like they were suggestions. Ethan sat in his truck at the final checkpoint, engine idling, watching the ash fall like gray snow against his windshield. He should have been halfway down the mountain by now, back to the valley where his 8-year-old son was waiting with Mrs. Chen next door. Should have been. The key phrase that separated people who followed protocol from people who couldn't sleep at night wondering if they'd missed something. Base, this is Cole. I'm doing one final sweep of the North Access Trail before I head down. Static crackled. Then Sarah's voice, tight with stress. Negative, Cole. That trail's been cleared. Wind's pushing the fire southeast. You need to move now. Ethan watched a pine tree explode into flame 200 yards upslope, the sound like a freight train made of anger. Copy that. Just want to be sure. 15 minutes? Then I'm out. He didn't wait for her response. The radio went into his jacket pocket as he put the truck in gear and headed up the access road that was supposed to be empty. The road that his instincts, honed through 6 years of volunteer rescue work and a lifetime of reading mountains the way other people read books, told him wasn't. The smoke thickened as he climbed, turning the afternoon sun into a dim orange memory. Ethan pulled his bandana up over his nose and mouth, eyes scanning the tree line through the driver's window. He'd walked this trail dozens of times, knew every switchback and overlook, every place someone might stop to take a photo or catch their breath. That's when he saw it. A flash of red through the smoke, too bright to be natural, too still to be flame. He was out of the truck before conscious thought caught up with decision, boots hitting the dirt road at a run. The woman was 30 yards off the trail, partially hidden by a fallen pine that had come down in the wind. The tree had her pinned from the waist down, her left leg twisted at an angle that made Ethan's stomach clench. She was conscious, her face streaked with dirt and ash, and when she saw him approaching through the smoke, something like despair crossed her features. Go back. Her voice was hoarse but clear. You need to go back right now. Ethan dropped to his knees beside her, already assessing. The tree was too heavy to lift alone, but there was maybe 6 inches of clearance where it had caught on a boulder. Her ankle was definitely broken, possibly her tibia too, based on the swelling he could see through her torn cargo pants. How long have you been here? Since the wind shifted, about 20 minutes. She coughed, the sound wet and painful. I tried to move it. Couldn't. What's your name? Lena. Lena Parker. She grabbed his arm with surprising strength, her fingers digging in. Listen to me. There's a child at home who needs their father more than I need a hero. The fire's moving too fast. You can't get me out in time. Ethan met her eyes. They were brown, he noticed distantly. Clear and rational and absolutely certain that she was going to die on this mountain. How do you know I have a kid? Your keychain. School photo. Little boy, maybe 7 or 8. She released his arm. Go back to him, please. For a moment, Ethan felt the weight of that choice. Felt it the way you feel altitude in your chest or cold in your bones. She was right about the math. The fire was maybe 10 minutes out, moving fast with the wind at its back. Getting her free would take at least 5, maybe more. Getting her down the mountain with a broken ankle, him carrying her full weight, would take another 15 at minimum. The numbers didn't work. His name's Danny, Ethan said, shrugging off his pack. He's 8. Lost his mom 3 years ago to cancer, so yeah, he needs his dad. He pulled out the compact winch he always carried, started looking for an anchor point, which is exactly why I can't teach him that you leave people behind when things get hard. This isn't hard. This is suicide. Then I guess we'd better move fast. Ethan found a solid pine 20 feet back, wrapped the winch cable around it twice. I'm going to lift this tree about a foot. When I do, you're going to pull yourself back and out. Don't try to stand, don't try to help. Just get clear. Understand? Lena's jaw tightened. You're insane. Probably. On 3. He positioned the winch, started cranking. The cable went taut, groaned with tension. 1, 2, 3. The tree lifted 6 inches, then 8, then finally cleared her legs completely. Lena screamed as she pulled herself back, the movement jarring her shattered ankle, but she got clear. Ethan released the tension and the tree dropped back with a crash that sent up a cloud of ash and needles. He was beside her in seconds, hands already checking her leg. The ankle was bad, but the bleeding was minimal. He could work with that. This is going to hurt, he said, pulling out a compression wrap. A lot. Everything already hurts. Fair point. He worked quickly, stabilizing the ankle as best he could, wrapping it tight enough to provide support without cutting off circulation. Lena's breathing came in sharp gasps, but she didn't cry out again. Tough, he thought. She'd need to be. The roar of the fire was louder now, close enough that Ethan could feel the temperature rising even through the smoke. He helped Lena into a sitting position, then crouched in front of her, back toward her. Arms around my neck. Hold on tight, and don't let go no matter what. I'm 5'8" and 140, Lena said. You can't carry me down this mountain. Ethan looked back at her over his shoulder. Watch me. He stood, taking her weight onto his back, feeling her arms lock around his shoulders. She was right. She wasn't light. But he'd carried his share of injured hikers over the years, and he'd been splitting firewood and hauling equipment since before Danny was born. His legs took the weight, his back straightened, and he started walking. The first 100 yards were manageable. The access road was relatively clear, and though the smoke was thick, Ethan knew the path by heart. He focused on his breathing, on placing each foot carefully, on the weight across his shoulders that represented a life he refused to let the mountain claim. Lena's breath was warm against his neck. Why? She asked quietly. Why what? Why are you doing this? Ethan stepped over a fallen branch, adjusted his grip under her knees. You really want to have a philosophical discussion right now? Might be my last chance. That shut him up for a few steps. Then, my wife, Claire. When she was dying, she made me promise something. Said Danny needed to learn that being strong didn't mean being hard. That the world would try to teach him to look away from people who needed help, to do the math, and make the easy choice. He paused to catch his breath, wiped sweat from his eyes. She said the only thing that matters is what you do when no one would blame you for walking away. She sounds like she was remarkable. She was. The smoke was getting worse, forcing Ethan to stop and pull his bandana higher. He could hear the fire now, a constant crackling roar punctuated by the explosive crash of burning trees. How about you? Anyone waiting for you down the mountain? No? Lena's voice was soft. Just me. What were you doing up here? Land survey. I'm a surveyor for the county, was checking boundary markers for the new development they're planning on the eastern slope. Something in her tone caught his attention. Was? She was quiet for a moment. Found some irregularities in the property lines. Things that didn't match the original survey from 15 years ago. Was supposed to file my report next week. Ethan's foot caught on a root and he stumbled, caught himself. His breathing was getting labored now, his legs starting to burn with the sustained effort. They'd covered maybe a quarter mile. Had at least another mile to go, maybe more. What kind of irregularities? The kind that suggests someone's been moving boundary markers. The kind that mean protected forest land might have been illegally reclassified for development. She coughed, the sound harsh. The kind worth a lot of money if nobody notices. A burning branch fell across the path ahead, forcing Ethan to detour into rougher terrain. His ankle turned on a loose stone and pain shot up his leg, but he kept moving. You think someone knows about your survey? I don't know, maybe. Probably paranoid, but I filed a preliminary memo last Friday, and the fire started Saturday morning. Lena's grip tightened around his shoulders. You need to put me down. You're not going to make it carrying me like this. She was right, but Ethan didn't say so. His shoulders were screaming, his back was on fire, and his legs felt like they were moving through concrete. The smoke was so thick now he could barely see 10 feet ahead. The heat was intense, shimmering the air, making every breath feel like inhaling sandpaper. Not happening, he managed. Ethan, listen to me. Danny needs you alive. Then we better keep moving. He pushed forward another 20 yards, then 30. Every step was a negotiation between will and physics, between what his body could do and what he was demanding it do anyway. The fire was close now, so close he could see the glow of it through the trees to the north, could hear the freight train roar of superheated air. Lena's arms went slack for a moment, and Ethan felt her weight shift. Hey, stay with me. Dizzy. Smoke. He stopped, crouched carefully to lower her to the ground against a boulder. Her face was gray beneath the ash, her breathing shallow. Smoke inhalation, probably the beginning of heat exhaustion. He pulled out his water bottle, made her drink. Can't, she whispered. Can't do this. Ethan took her face in his hands, made her look at him. Yes, you can. 5 more minutes, Lena. That's all I need from you. 5 minutes of staying conscious and holding on. Can you do that? She blinked slowly, trying to focus. Why do you care so much? Because 3 years ago, I stood next to my wife's hospital bed and watched her die, and there was nothing I could do about it. Nothing that mattered. Nothing that changed the outcome. His voice was rough, and not just from the smoke. This, right here, this I can do something about. So you're going to hold on, and I'm going to carry you down this mountain, and we're both going to live to have a really good story to tell. Something shifted in her eyes. A decision made, or maybe surrendered. She nodded. Ethan got her back on his shoulders and stood. His legs shook with the effort, his vision graying at the edges, but he stood. And then he started walking again. The next 10 minutes blurred into an endless cycle of step, breathe, step. The fire was everywhere now, racing through the canopy overhead, jumping from tree to tree with terrifying speed. Burning branches rained down around them. Ethan's jacket started smoldering in 3 places before he could beat out the embers. Lena was singing something under her breath, or maybe praying. No, not praying, counting. Counting his steps in a quiet, steady rhythm that somehow helped him keep moving. 97, 98, 99, 100. Keep going, she whispered when he started to slow. 200 steps. You can do 200 steps. He could. And then 300. And then he broke through the worst of the smoke and saw the access road widening ahead, saw his truck exactly where he'd left it, looking impossibly far away, but also blessedly real. Almost there, he gasped. Almost. Lena's counting had stopped. Her arms were still locked around his neck, but her body was limp, unconscious. Ethan forced his legs to move faster, to close the final 100 yards to the truck. The heat was unbearable now, the fire so close he could feel it trying to suck the oxygen from his lungs. 50 yards. 25. 10. His hand hit the truck's door handle, and he fumbled it open, easing Lena into the passenger seat as gently as his shaking arms would allow. He threw himself into the driver's seat, turned the key with fingers that didn't want to work, and the engine caught on the second try. The truck lurched forward just as a massive pine came down right where they'd been standing, exploding in a shower of sparks and flame. Ethan didn't look back. He kept his foot on the gas, navigating by memory and instinct through smoke so thick the headlights barely penetrated it. The access road dropped steeply, switchbacking down the mountain face. Ethan took the turns faster than he should have, tires sliding on loose gravel. But the fire was faster. It was racing them down the mountain, jumping ahead through the forest, trying to cut them off. Beside him, Lena stirred, coughed. Her eyes opened, unfocused. Did we? Not yet. Hold on. The road straightened out for a quarter mile, and Ethan pushed the truck to 40, 50, 60 miles an hour. Wind roared through the open windows, hot and thick with ash. Lena braced herself against the dashboard, watching the wall of flame through the passenger window. There, she pointed ahead. The fire jumped the road. She was right. 200 yards ahead, Flames had crossed the access road, creating a burning barrier that stretched 20 feet wide. Beyond it, Ethan could see clearer air, could see the road dropping down into safer territory. "We're not stopping," he said. Lena looked at him, then at the wall of fire, then back at him. A laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep, slightly hysterical. "You're absolutely insane." "Heard that before." Ethan floored the accelerator. The truck's engine roared, speed climbing, 70, 80. The heat was incredible as they hit the fire, like driving into an oven. Ethan felt his eyebrows singe, felt the air in his lungs turn to scalding steam. The windshield cracked with the temperature change, spiderwebbing across his field of vision. And then they were through, bursting out the other side into clear air, the truck's paint scorched, but the engine still running. Lena was laughing and crying at the same time, her good hand pressed against her mouth. Ethan eased off the gas, his whole body shaking with adrenaline and exhaustion. Behind them, the mountain burned. Ahead, the valley spread out in the late afternoon sun, peaceful and green and completely untouched by fire. "We made it," Lena whispered. "We actually made it." Ethan nodded, not trusting his voice. His hands were locked on the steering wheel, knuckles white, and he couldn't seem to make them relax. His shoulders felt like someone had beaten them with a hammer. His lungs burned with every breath. But they'd made it. The checkpoint at the base of the mountain was chaos. Fire trucks, ambulances, sheriff's vehicles all clustered around the staging area. Ethan pulled in and was immediately surrounded by EMTs, by Sarah from dispatch pulling open his door with tears streaming down her face. "You stupid, stupid man," she was saying, but she was hugging him fiercely. "We thought you were dead. We saw the fire jump the road and thought—" "I'm okay," Ethan managed. "But she needs help. Broken ankle, possible smoke inhalation." The EMTs had Lena out of the truck and onto a gurney in seconds. Oxygen mask over her face, hands checking her vitals. She reached out, caught Ethan's arm as he tried to follow. Her eyes were clear now, focused and intense. "Thank you," she said, "for being insane." He squeezed her hand. "Thank you for counting." Then they were taking her away to the ambulance, and someone was wrapping a blanket around Ethan's shoulders, and someone else was pressing a bottle of water into his hands. He drank it automatically, watching the mountain burn in the distance, watching the smoke column rise into the sky. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen. "Danny's worried. You okay?" Ethan's fingers shook as he typed back, "On my way home. Tell him I love him." The sheriff, Tom Morrison, appeared at his elbow. They'd known each other since high school, had worked a dozen search and rescue operations together. "Heard you went back up after evacuation was called." "Yeah." "Found someone." "Yeah." Tom was quiet for a moment. "You know I should write you up for that." "I know." "Probably saved her life." "Probably." Tom clapped him on the shoulder. "Get yourself checked out by the medics, then go home to your boy. We'll talk about the paperwork later." Ethan submitted to a quick examination, minor burns, smoke inhalation, dehydration, exhaustion, then signed the papers saying he was leaving against medical advice. He needed to get home. Needed to see Danny, to hold him, to remember why he'd made the choice to go back up that mountain. The drive down to the valley took 20 minutes. Ethan's hands were steady on the wheel now, though his body was starting to feel every mile he'd carried Lena, every moment of strain and fear. He'd pay for this tomorrow, with muscles that wouldn't work and bruises in places he didn't know existed. Mrs. Chen's house was a small ranch at the end of Maple Street. Ethan pulled into the driveway and cut the engine, sitting for a moment in the sudden silence. Through the front window he could see Danny on the couch, his small frame curled up, eyes fixed on the door. The boy must have heard the truck because the door flew open and Danny was running, arms wide, tears streaming down his face. Ethan met him halfway up the walk, dropping to his knees and catching his son in a hug that squeezed too tight and lasted too long. "You smell like smoke," Danny sobbed into his shoulder. "Mrs. Chen said you were probably okay, but the news said the fire was really bad and I was so scared." "I know, buddy, I know. I'm sorry." Ethan pulled back enough to look at his son's face, to brush the tears away with his thumbs. "I'm okay. I promise." "You promised you'd come back and you did." Danny hugged him again. "You always come back." Ethan closed his eyes, feeling the weight of that promise, the weight of every time he'd put on his rescue gear and headed into danger. Claire had made him promise to come back too, every single time. And he had, until the day she couldn't. Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway, her weathered face creased with relief. I kept him away from the TV as much as I could, but you know how kids are. He saw enough. Thank you, Lynn, for everything. She waved a hand. That's what neighbors do. You get some rest. I'll bring dinner over later. Ethan stood, Danny still clinging to him, and carried his son inside their own house next door. The living room was exactly as he'd left it that morning, toys scattered across the floor, Danny's math homework on the coffee table, yesterday's newspaper still folded by his reading chair. Normal, safe, home. He settled onto the couch with Danny curled against his side, the boy's breathing gradually evening out as the fear drained away. Ethan stared at the ceiling, feeling the adrenaline finally leaving his system, feeling the full weight of exhaustion settling into his bones. His phone buzzed again, a number he didn't recognize. He almost didn't answer, but something made him swipe to accept. Mr. Cole? This is Dr. Reeves at Valley Memorial. Lena Parker asked me to call you. She wanted you to know she's going to be fine. Surgery on the ankle went well, vitals are stable, and she should make a full recovery. Relief flooded through him. Thank you for letting me know. She also wanted me to tell you... The doctor paused. She said to tell you that she finished the count, made it to 2,000 steps before she passed out. Wanted to make sure you knew. Ethan laughed, the sound rough and unexpected. Tell her I knew she had it in her. He ended the call and looked down at Danny, who had finally fallen asleep against his side, one small hand fisted in Ethan's shirt, like he was afraid his father might disappear if he let go. The afternoon light slanted through the windows, turning the dust motes to gold, and somewhere in the distance, sirens still wailed as crews fought to contain the fire. Tomorrow, he'd have to explain to Danny what happened. Would have to find words to explain why he'd made the choice to risk not coming home. Would have to somehow communicate that some things mattered more than safety, that courage meant doing what was right even when it was hard. But that was tomorrow. Right now, he was here, with his son safe in his arms and the woman he'd pulled from the fire alive in a hospital bed. The math hadn't worked, but they'd survived anyway. Sometimes that was enough. Ethan closed his eyes and let himself rest. 3 days after the fire, Ethan sat in Valley Memorial's cafeteria, nursing his second cup of terrible coffee and trying to convince himself he was only there to check on a rescue he'd completed. That it was standard follow-up, the kind of thing any responsible volunteer would do. That the tightness in his chest when he'd called the hospital that morning and asked about Lena Parker's condition had nothing to do with the way her voice had sounded when she'd told him to save himself, or the way her arms had locked around his neck and refused to let go. Danny was at school. Mrs. Chen had insisted on taking him that morning, despite Ethan's protests that he was perfectly capable of normal parenting duties. She'd looked at the circles under his eyes and the way his hands still trembled slightly when he thought no one was watching, and she'd simply said, "Go see your friend, I'll handle the pickup." So here he was, staring at his coffee like it might contain answers, when his phone rang. Tom Morrison's name lit up the screen. "Hey, Tom. Need you to come down to the station when you get a chance." The sheriff's voice was carefully neutral, the tone he used when something was wrong, but he couldn't say so over an unsecured line. "Bringing in someone who wants to talk to you about the fire." Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. "What about it?" "Rather discuss it in person. How soon can you get here?" 20 minutes. "Good. Bring coffee. This might take a while." The line went dead. Ethan stood, dumped his coffee in the trash, and headed for the elevator. Room 342 was on the 3rd floor, and he told himself he was just letting Lena know he'd be delayed, that it was courtesy, nothing more. She was sitting up in bed when he knocked, her left leg encased in a cast from toe to knee, elevated on pillows. Her hair was clean now, pulled back in a ponytail, and without the ash and dirt, he could see she was younger than he'd thought. Early 30s, maybe? With sharp features and those same clear brown eyes that had looked at him through the smoke and calculated the odds of survival. "Ethan." She smiled, and it transformed her face from merely attractive to something that made his breath catch. "I was hoping you'd stop by. They said you've called every day. Just following up. Standard procedure. He stayed in the doorway, suddenly awkward in a way he hadn't been since high school. How are you feeling? Like someone dropped a tree on my leg and then made me run a marathon. She gestured to the chair beside her bed. But alive, which is considerably better than the alternative. Come in, unless you're planning to conduct this wellness check from the hallway. He moved into the room, settled into the chair. Up close, he could see the fine lines around her eyes, the exhaustion that lingered beneath her smile. Doctor says you'll make a full recovery. In 6 to 8 weeks, followed by physical therapy, followed by learning to trust my own ankle again. Lena's smile faded. They also told me what you did, carrying me almost 2 miles down a mountain with a wildfire on your heels. The nurses keep asking if you're single. They tell all their patients rescuers that? Only the ones who look like you just walked off a recruitment poster for heroic single dads. She was studying him with the same intensity she'd probably used to survey land, measuring and calculating. Thank you doesn't really cover it, does it? What do you say to someone who risked their life for yours when the smart money said to leave you behind? Ethan shifted in the chair. You say you'd have done the same thing. Would I? Lena's gaze didn't waver. I've spent the last 3 days thinking about that, about what I would have done if our positions were reversed. And honestly, I don't know. I've always been good at math, at risk assessment, at making logical choices. But what you did wasn't logical. No, he admitted. It wasn't. Why did you really come back? And don't give me the line about teaching your son to help people. That was true, but it wasn't all of it. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, searching for words that wouldn't sound like he'd lost his mind. When Claire was dying, the doctors gave us statistics, survival rates, treatment options, percentages that kept getting smaller. And I watched her fight anyway, watched her choose hope over math every single day until she couldn't anymore. He met Lena's eyes. When I saw you on that mountain, all I could think was that someone was getting a fighting chance, that the numbers didn't get to win this time. Lena's expression softened. Your wife sounds like she was extraordinary. She was. Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from Tom. Where are you? I have to go. Sheriff needs to see me about something. About the fire. It wasn't a question. Lena's face had gone very still. They know it wasn't accidental, don't they? How did you? Because 2 days ago, a fire investigator came in here asking very specific questions about where I was when the fire started and what I was doing on that trail. She leaned forward despite the obvious pain it caused. And because this morning, I got a call from my supervisor telling me my employment with the county surveyor's office has been suspended pending an investigation into professional misconduct. Ethan felt ice slide down his spine. What kind of misconduct? Falsifying survey data, submitting fraudulent reports, making unsubstantiated claims about property boundaries. Her laugh was bitter. All the things I was specifically trying to expose, now being used against me. That's insane. You almost died trying to document evidence of fraud, which makes me either a very dedicated whistleblower or a very desperate liar trying to cover her tracks. Lena's hands clenched the bedsheets. My preliminary report is missing from the county system. Every file I submitted last Friday is gone. My laptop, which was in my truck at the trailhead, was destroyed in the fire along with the vehicle. And the backup drive I kept in my apartment, someone broke in 2 nights ago and took it. Did you call the police? Of course, they took a report, dusted for prints, found nothing, said it looked like a standard burglary. She met his eyes. My TV is still there, Ethan. My laptop, my grandmother's jewelry, my camera equipment. They took one thing, my backup drive with survey data. Ethan stood. I need to go talk to Tom. Don't speak to anyone else about this until I get back. Why? What can the sheriff do? I don't know yet. But if what you're saying is true, someone tried to kill you and make it look like an accident. And now they're trying to destroy your credibility so no one believes your evidence. He paused at the door. The question is, what were you about to expose that's worth all that trouble? Lena's smile was sharp. Want to find out? Ethan looked at her, this woman he'd known for 3 days, this stranger he'd carried down a mountain because walking away wasn't something he knew how to do. She was offering him a door into something dark and complicated, something that would put him in the crosshairs of people willing to commit arson and burglary to protect their secrets. He thought about Danny, waiting at school for his father to pick him up. Thought about the promise he'd made to Claire to keep their son safe, to be there for him, to not take unnecessary risks. Thought about all the very good reasons to walk away from whatever this was. "Yeah," he said, "I do." The sheriff's station was a low brick building on Main Street, sandwiched between the hardware store and what used to be a video rental place before streaming killed that industry. Ethan had been here dozens of times over the years, coordinating search and rescue operations, filing reports, drinking Tom's terrible coffee while they worked through logistics. Tom was waiting in his office, and he wasn't alone. A woman in her 50s sat across from his desk, her gray suit crisp despite the mountain heat, her expression the carefully neutral mask of someone who'd spent years delivering bad news. "Ethan, this is Fire Investigator Sarah Chen from the State Fire Marshal's office." Tom gestured to the empty chair. "She's been looking into the Silver Ridge fire." "No relation to your neighbor," Chen said, offering her hand. "Though I understand she's been helping with your son while you've been dealing with the aftermath." Ethan shook her hand, noting the calluses that spoke of field work, the slight smell of smoke that clung to her jacket. "What did you find?" Chen pulled a tablet from her briefcase, swiped through several photos. The fire started in 3 separate locations within a 2-hour window Saturday morning. All 3 points of origin show evidence of accelerant use. Specifically, a commercial-grade delayed ignition compound designed for controlled burns. Someone said it deliberately. Someone with knowledge of wildfire behavior and access to professional equipment. Chen pulled up a map, 3 red dots marking the fire's origins. The pattern was designed to create a pincer movement, trapping anyone in this specific area. Her finger traced a highlighted section of trail, the same area where Lena Parker was conducting her survey. Ethan leaned forward, studying the map. The implications were staggering. "You're saying someone tried to murder her and disguise it as a wildfire casualty?" "I'm saying the evidence is consistent with that theory." Chen's voice was carefully professional. "What I need from you is a detailed account of everything Lena told you during the rescue. Everything about why she was there, what she was doing, anything she might have said about her work." So Ethan told them. About finding her trapped, about the conversation during the carry down the mountain, about her mention of irregularities in the property survey, and her suspicion that boundary markers had been moved. He told them about her preliminary report, about the missing files and the convenient burglary. Tom's expression darkened with each detail. "How much land are we talking about?" She didn't specify, but she mentioned it was for the new development on the eastern slope, the Ridgeline Vista project. Chen and Tom exchanged glances. "Tell him," Chen said quietly. Tom pulled out a folder, slid it across the desk. "Ridgeline Vista is a $300 million development, 200 luxury homes, a golf course, shopping center, the works. It's being built by Pinnacle Mountain Development, which is a subsidiary of Cascade Holdings, which is owned by—" "Let me guess," Ethan interrupted, "someone with enough money and connections to make problems disappear." "Marcus Hale," Tom said, "and before you ask, yes, that Marcus Hale. Former state senator, current real estate magnate, and owner of half the commercial property in this county." He tapped the folder. The Ridgeline Vista project was approved 18 months ago after Hale donated $2 million to the county's Environmental Protection Fund. Ironic, considering what we're looking at now. Ethan opened the folder. Inside were property maps, environmental impact reports, and a sheaf of legal documents dense with corporate language. "What am I looking for?" "Page 12, Chen said. "The original environmental survey from 15 years ago." Ethan found it, a detailed topographical map with colored sections indicating protected forest land, watershed areas, and zones cleared for development. Then he flipped to page 13, which showed the current approved boundaries for Ridgeline Vista. The difference was subtle but unmistakable. The development had expanded to include sections that had been marked as protected forest in the original survey. Not by much, maybe 40 acres total, but in this market, 40 acres of pristine mountain land was worth tens of millions. "Lena noticed this?" Ethan asked. "She did more than notice," Tom said. "According to her supervisor, who by the way is now claiming he never received her preliminary report. She spent 3 weeks physically walking the boundaries, checking marker positions against the original survey maps. And she found that someone had systematically moved markers to shift the property lines. 40 acres of protected forest, Chen added, that suddenly became available for luxury development, clean water access, untouched timber, views that would add $100,000 to each home's sale price. Ethan sat back, processing. So Hale, or someone working for him, moved the markers, got the new boundaries approved, and when Lena discovered the fraud, they tried to eliminate her and destroy the evidence. That's the theory, Tom said. Proving it is another matter. The missing files, the burglary, the fire itself. Individually, they're all circumstantial. Together they paint a picture, but without Lena's original survey data, we have no proof the markers were moved. She had field notes, Ethan said. During the rescue, she was very specific about what she'd found. GPS coordinates, discrepancies in the measurements, photographs of the markers. Chen leaned forward. If she had photographs, if she has any backup of that data anywhere, we can build a case. But we need her cooperation, and right now she's unemployed, under investigation for fraud, and facing the possibility that no one will believe her even if she does come forward. That's why they went after her credibility first, Ethan realized. Discredit the witness before she can testify. Classic playbook, Tom agreed. And it's working. The county administrator is already talking about a full audit of all surveys Lena completed in the past 5 years. Every property line she drew, every boundary she marked, now suspect. Even if she's vindicated eventually, her career is destroyed. Ethan thought about Lena in her hospital bed, jaw set with determination despite the pain and exhaustion. Thought about the way she'd looked at the fire and done the math, calculated her own death with the same precision she probably used to measure land. What do you need from me? Talk to her, Chen said. Convince her to tell us everything she knows, give us everything she has. We can protect her, but only if she's willing to cooperate fully. Protect her how? You just said someone burned down a forest trying to kill her, broke into her apartment, destroyed her reputation. Ethan's voice was harder than he intended. Forgive me if I'm skeptical about your ability to keep her safe. Tom stood, moved to the window overlooking Main Street. You're right to be skeptical. Truth is, we're a small-town sheriff's department going up against one of the most powerful men in the state. My jurisdiction ends at the county line, and even within it, Hale has friends. People who owe him favors. People whose businesses depend on his goodwill. So why are you pursuing this? Tom turned back, and his expression was grim. Because 3 years ago, when your wife was dying, Marcus Hale tried to buy your house. Offered you twice market value, said he wanted the land for another development project. You remember that? Ethan remembered. Claire had been in her final weeks, and some corporate lawyer had shown up at his door with a contract and a check. He'd thrown them both out and threatened to call the sheriff if they came back. He wanted the whole block, Tom continued. Your house, the Chen's place, 4 other properties. Needed them to create access to a parcel he was developing. When you refused to sell, the project stalled, cost him millions. You think this is personal? I think Marcus Hale is a man who doesn't like obstacles, and I think he's been systematically removing them for years. Lena Parker is just the latest. Tom moved back to his desk. But she's also the first one who documented everything, who has the technical expertise to prove fraud. If we can get her evidence, we can stop him. Maybe not permanently, but we can slow him down, cost him enough money and reputation that he thinks twice about who he tries to eliminate next. Ethan stood. I'll talk to her, but I'm not going to push her into anything. She's been through enough. Understood. Chen handed him her card. Have her call me directly. And Ethan, watch your back. If Hale figures out you're involved, you become a problem too. The drive back to the hospital took 10 minutes. But Ethan's mind was racing through calculations of risk and consequence the entire way. This wasn't a rescue operation with clear parameters and defined objectives. This was complicated, messy, and potentially dangerous, not just for him but for Danny. He thought about his son, about the promise he'd made to Claire, but he also thought about what she'd said, about teaching Danny that being strong meant helping people even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. Lena was on the phone when he knocked, but she waved him in, wrapping up the conversation quickly. My lawyer, she explained, trying to figure out if I even have a legal leg to stand on, pun very much intended. How bad is it? Career ending if I can't prove my case, and right now proving my case requires data I don't have access to. She studied his face. You talked to the fire investigator. She thinks someone tried to kill you, set the fire deliberately to trap you in that specific area. Lena's expression didn't change, but her hands clenched the blanket. I know. You know? I've had 3 days lying in this bed with nothing to do but think. About the timing, about the missing files, about how convenient it was that my truck burned. She met his eyes. What I don't know is what to do about it. Ethan pulled the chair closer, kept his voice low. The fire investigator needs your help. Whatever data you have, whatever evidence you collected, they can use it to build a case against the people responsible. And if I cooperate, I become a target. Again, Lena's laugh was shaky. I'm a surveyor, Ethan. I measure things. I calculate angles and distances. I don't testify against powerful men who burn forests to cover their crimes. No, he agreed. But you document the truth. That's what you do. You make sure the measurements are accurate, the boundaries are correct, the lines are drawn where they should be. This isn't about lines on a map anymore. Isn't it? Ethan leaned forward. Someone moved those markers because they thought no one would check, because they thought they could redraw reality to suit their profits. You found the fraud. You documented it. Now you have to decide if you're going to let them erase that truth the same way they tried to erase you. Lena was quiet for a long moment. Then, I have a backup. You said they took your backup drive. They took one backup drive, the official one I kept in my apartment. A small smile played at her lips. But I also have a personal cloud storage account that I've been using since grad school. Every survey I've ever done, every measurement, every photograph, backed up automatically, including the Ridgeline Vista survey. Ethan felt hope surge. Can you access it? From any computer. But Ethan, if I turn this over, if I go public with what I found, my life changes. Not just my career, my actual life. Hale has resources, connections, lawyers who will tear apart every word I say, and that's assuming he stops at legal methods. The sheriff can protect you. Can he? Can he really? Lena's voice rose slightly. I'll be looking over my shoulder for years, wondering if every car that follows me a little too long, every stranger who makes eye contact, every unexpected knock at the door is connected to this. That's what I get for being thorough, for doing my job right. Ethan understood her fear because he'd lived with a version of it himself. The fear of loss, of leaving Danny alone, of making choices that put his son at risk. But he'd also learned something in the 3 years since Claire died, something about courage and consequence. You're right, he said quietly. Going public changes everything, makes you visible, vulnerable, puts a target on your back that might never come off. But not going public, that changes you too, into someone who knows the truth and chooses silence, into someone who measures the cost of courage and decides it's too high. That's not fair. No, it's not. None of this is fair, but it's the choice in front of you. He stood. The investigator's card is on your table. She's waiting for your call. Whatever you decide, I'll support it. He was at the door when Lena spoke again. Why do you care so much? You don't know me. We met 3 days ago in the worst possible circumstances. You should be home with your son, as far from this mess as possible. Ethan turned back. 3 years ago, I watched someone I loved die while people who could have helped chose not to. Drug companies that prioritize profits over research, insurance companies that denied treatments, systems that failed because no one wanted to rock the boat or take the risk. His voice was steady but hard. I won't watch someone else get destroyed by people who think power means they can do whatever they want. Not if there's something I can do about it. Even if it puts you in danger? I've been in danger before. I'll probably be in danger again. But at least I'll be able to look my son in the eye and tell him his dad stood for something that mattered. Lena picked up the investigator's card, turned it over in her hands. If I do this, I'll need help. Someone who knows the area, who can verify locations, who can testify that the survey data is accurate. I know every trail on that mountain, worked search and rescue there for 6 years. And if Hale comes after you, after your family? Ethan thought about Danny, about Mrs. Chen next door, about the life he'd built in the 3 years since Claire died. Small, and safe and carefully controlled. Then I guess we deal with it. Together. Together, Lena repeated, like she was testing the word. I've been alone for a long time, Ethan. I'm not sure I remember how to do together. Neither am I, he admitted, but I'm willing to learn if you are. She stared at him for a long moment, those clear brown eyes measuring and calculating, doing the math on risk and trust and possibility. Then she reached for her phone. What's the investigator's number? The call to fire investigator Chen lasted 45 minutes, and by the end of it, Lena's hospital room had transformed into an impromptu war room. Chen arrived with Tom Morrison 30 minutes after hanging up, both of them carrying laptops and file boxes that suggested this investigation had been building for longer than Ethan realized. Before we start, Chen said, setting up her laptop on the rolling table beside Lena's bed, I need to be clear about what happens next. Once you give us access to your data, once you formally agree to cooperate with this investigation, there's no walking it back. Marcus Hale will know you're the source. His lawyers will come after you. And if our case isn't airtight, you could face legal consequences for breach of confidentiality, defamation, even criminal charges if he can manufacture evidence of fraud. Lena's jaw tightened, but her voice was steady. I understand. I'm not sure you do. Tom pulled up a chair, his expression grave. Hale owns the second largest law firm in the state. He has 3 former judges on retainer. Last year, a construction foreman tried to blow the whistle on safety violations at one of Hale's developments. By the time Hale's legal team was done, the foreman had lost his contractor's license, his house, and his marriage. He's working as a night manager at a gas station now. Are you trying to talk me out of this? Lena asked. I'm trying to make sure you know what you're getting into, Tom replied. Because once we open this door, we can't close it. And if the evidence isn't enough, if we can't prove fraud beyond reasonable doubt, you'll have destroyed your career for nothing. Ethan, standing near the window, watched Lena's face carefully. He could see the fear there, the very rational calculation of everything she stood to lose. But he could also see something else, something he recognized from the mountain. That same steel core that had kept her counting his steps even as smoke filled her lungs. Show me what you need, she said. Chen's fingers flew across her keyboard. Your cloud storage. Full access to everything related to the Ridgeline Vista survey. Original GPS coordinates, photographs of boundary markers, field notes, measurements, anything that documents the discrepancies you found. Lena logged into her account on Chen's laptop, her fingers trembling slightly as she navigated through folders. I conducted the survey over 3 weeks in April. The county wanted verification of the approved boundaries before breaking ground. Standard procedure for a project this size. Files began populating on the screen. Hundreds of them, organized by date and location. Photographs of brass survey markers embedded in stone. GPS readouts showing coordinates down to the centimeter. Hand-drawn maps with annotations in Lena's precise handwriting. I started at the eastern boundary, Lena explained, pointing to a series of photos. These markers should have been positioned according to the 2010 environmental survey. But when I checked them against the original coordinates, they were off. Not by much, maybe 20 to 30 feet in most cases, but enough to shift the boundary line significantly when you extend it across 40 acres. Chen zoomed in on one photograph, a close-up of a brass marker embedded in granite. This shows signs of recent installation. See the fresh scratches on the metal? The lack of weathering around the mounting points? All 15 markers I checked on the eastern boundary showed similar signs, Lena said. Someone had removed the original markers and installed new ones in slightly different positions. If you didn't have the original GPS coordinates to compare against, you'd never notice. Tom was making notes, his expression darkening. And these new positions just happened to expand the developable land into what should have been protected forest. 42 acres, Lena confirmed. At current market rates, with the premium for mountain views and water access, that's approximately $60 million in additional property value. Ethan moved closer to the screen, studying the photographs. How hard would it be to move these markers without getting caught? Not hard at all, if you knew what you were doing, Lena said. The boundary markers are checked maybe once every 10 years unless someone specifically requests a new survey. You'd need access to the original coordinates, some basic surveying equipment, and enough time to physically relocate 15 markers. A professional crew could do it in a weekend. And Hale would have had access to all of that, Chen said. His company has a surveying division. They do their own preliminary assessments before purchasing land. Tom looked up from his notes. Do we know when the markers were moved? Lena pulled up another set of files, these showing dated satellite imagery. I requested historical satellite photos of the area through a research database I have access to. Look at this image from March 2023, 2 months before Hale purchased the land. You can see the original marker positions as small reflective points. Now look at this image from September 2023, 4 months after the purchase. The markers had shifted. It was subtle, requiring careful comparison, but unmistakable once you knew what to look for. He moved them after the purchase, but before the final boundary verification, Chen said slowly. That gave him time to get the fraudulent boundaries approved before anyone noticed the discrepancy. And it would have worked, Lena added, except the county required a new comprehensive survey before breaking ground. Standard environmental protection measure. They hired me because I have a reputation for being thorough. Too thorough, Ethan said quietly. The room fell silent. They all understood what had happened next. Lena had found the fraud, documented it, filed her preliminary report. And within 24 hours, someone had decided she was a problem that needed to be eliminated. Chen closed the laptop carefully. This is good. This is very good. With your testimony and this documentation, we can prove the markers were moved. We can establish timeline, demonstrate fraud, show intent to deceive. But? Lena asked, because there was always a but. But we still need to connect it directly to Hale. Right now, we can prove someone moved the markers. We can prove the boundaries were fraudulently altered. What we can't prove is that Hale ordered it or even knew about it. His lawyers will argue it was a mistake by a subordinate, an error in the surveying process, anything to create reasonable doubt. What about the fire? Ethan asked. Someone set it deliberately to trap Lena. That's attempted murder. Which we also can't prove was Hale's doing, Tom said. The accelerant used is commercially available. The timing is suspicious but not definitive. And Hale was in Sacramento at a development conference the morning the fire started. 30 witnesses can place him 200 miles away. Lena leaned back against her pillows, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. So what you're saying is that I give up everything, put a target on my back, and we still might not be able to touch him. I'm saying we need more, Chen replied. We need someone inside Hale's organization willing to testify. We need financial records showing payments for the surveying work. We need communication, emails, text messages, recorded conversations that prove Hale knew about the fraud. How are we supposed to get that? We keep investigating. We put pressure on the people who work for him, see if anyone's willing to flip. We subpoena records, follow the money trail. Chen's expression was determined. This data you've given us is the foundation. Now we build the case around it. Ethan's phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen. Danny's asking when you'll be home. Everything okay? He typed back quickly. Soon. Tell him I'm helping a friend. Love you both. When he looked up, Tom was watching him. You should go. Be with your son. This is going to take time, and there's nothing more you can do here today. He's right, Lena said. You've done enough, Ethan. More than enough. But Ethan was thinking about the timeline Chen had laid out, about investigating and building cases and following money trails while Lena sat exposed and vulnerable. How long before Hale knows she's cooperating? Tom and Chen exchanged glances. If he doesn't know already, he will soon. We'll have to file subpoenas, interview his employees, request financial records. That kind of activity gets noticed. So she's in danger. We can provide protection, Tom began. What kind of protection? A patrol car driving by her apartment twice a night? Ethan's voice was harder than he intended. You said yourself Hale has resources and connections. He tried to kill her once. What's to stop him from trying again? I can take care of myself, Lena said, but her voice lacked conviction. Ethan looked at her, at the cast on her leg, at the exhaustion in her eyes, at the way her hands trembled slightly when she thought no one was watching. No offense, but you can barely walk. How are you going to take care of yourself against someone with Hale's resources? What are you suggesting? Tom asked carefully. The idea had been forming in the back of Ethan's mind since Chen had laid out the timeline, since he'd realized how exposed Lena would be once the investigation went public. It was probably crazy. Definitely complicated, but it was the only thing that made sense. She stays with me, Ethan said, at my house, until this is over. The room went very quiet. Lena stared at him like he'd suggested they fly to Mars. That's insane. Is it? You said yourself you're being released tomorrow. Where are you going to go? Back to an apartment that's already been broken into? To a hotel where you're alone and isolated? He turned to Tom. How long before you can guarantee her safety? Honestly, weeks, maybe months. We'd have to go through official channels, request protective custody, coordinate with the state. So she's on her own until then. Perfect target for anyone Hale sends after her. And your solution is to paint a target on yourself and your son too? Lena's voice rose. Ethan, this is exactly what I was trying to avoid. Dragging other people into my mess, putting innocent people at risk. Too late. I'm already in it. The moment I carried you off that mountain, I became part of this story. He moved closer to her bed, kept his voice steady. My house has good security. Motion sensors, cameras that Mrs. Chen made me install after Claire died. It's in a neighborhood with lots of families, lots of eyes on the street, and I know the area, know the people, know when something's out of place. What about Danny? Tom asked. You really want to explain to your 8-year-old why a stranger is living in your house? Why there might be people watching your home? I'll tell him the truth. That someone needs help and we're in a position to provide it. That's what we do in our family. Ethan looked at Lena. Claire used to bring home strays all the time. Neighbors going through rough patches, friends who needed a place to stay, once an entire family whose house flooded. Danny grew up understanding that our home was a safe place for people who needed it. This isn't a flooded house situation, Lena said quietly. This is people who set fires and break into apartments and destroy careers. This is dangerous, Ethan. I know, but it's still the right thing to do. Chen closed her laptop with a decisive click. Actually, it might work. Having Lena in a stable, monitored location makes our job easier. We can coordinate with Ethan, set up additional security if needed, maintain regular contact. She looked at Lena. And frankly, you'll recover better in a home environment than alone in an apartment watching over your shoulder. This is crazy, Lena repeated, but Ethan could hear the resistance weakening. Probably, he agreed. But we've already established that crazy seems to be my default setting lately. 3 days ago, I ran into a wildfire. This is actually less immediately life-threatening. Barely. Tom stood, gathering his files. If you're serious about this, we need to set some ground rules. Regular check-ins with my office, no discussing the case in public, maintaining awareness of your surroundings at all times. And Ethan, if you see anything suspicious, anyone watching the house, unfamiliar vehicles, anything at all, you call me immediately. Not after you investigate, not after you think about it. Immediately. Understood. Lena, same goes for you. You don't leave the house without letting us know. You don't talk to anyone about the case except through your lawyer. You especially don't try to investigate on your own or follow up on any leads. Lena nodded slowly. What about my work? I'm suspended, but I still have projects that need attention, clients who are expecting reports. All of that gets put on hold, Chen said firmly. Right now, your only job is staying safe and staying available to testify when we need you. Everything else is secondary. After Chen and Tom left, Ethan settled back into the chair beside Lena's bed. She was staring at the ceiling, her expression unreadable. You don't have to do this, she said finally. I know you're trying to help, but you have Danny to think about. A life to protect. I can figure something else out. Like what? I don't know. Find a different place to stay. Hire private security. Something that doesn't involve inserting myself into your family. Ethan was quiet for a moment, searching for the right words. After Claire died, people kept telling me I needed to protect Danny from the world, to keep him safe from anything that might hurt him, or scare him, or make his life harder than it already was. He met Lena's eyes. But Claire didn't raise him that way. She taught him that safety isn't the same as hiding, that the world is full of hard things, scary things, unfair things. And the answer isn't to run from them, but to face them with courage and help where you can. He's 8 years old. Old enough to understand that someone tried to hurt you because you told the truth. Old enough to recognize that we have the ability to keep you safe. Old enough to learn what it means to stand up for what's right, even when it's complicated. He smiled slightly. Besides, you'll be good for him. Someone new to talk to, someone smart and capable who doesn't treat him like he's fragile because his mom died. You really think this will work? I think it has to. Because the alternative is you alone and exposed while we wait for the legal system to slowly build a case. And I'm not willing to accept that alternative. Lena was quiet for a long time. Then, so softly he almost didn't hear it. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You haven't met Danny. Kid asks about a million questions and has opinions on everything from proper sandwich construction to whether dinosaurs would have made good pets. That surprised a laugh out of her. I look forward to it. Ethan stood, checked his watch. I need to get home. Explain the situation before Danny hears it from someone else. Hospital's releasing you tomorrow morning? That's what they said. 10 a.m. if the doctor signs off on it. I'll be here at 9:30. Bring you to the house. Get you settled. He paused at the door. Pack light. And Lena, whatever happens next, we face it together. You're not alone in this anymore. After he left, Lena stared at the door for a long time, trying to process how her life had transformed in the span of less than a week. 7 days ago, she'd been a county surveyor with a quiet life and a reputation for precision. Now she was unemployed, under investigation, possibly targeted for murder, and about to move in with a widowed firefighter and his 8-year-old son. The smart thing would be to refuse Ethan's offer, to find her own solution, keep him and his family clear of the mess she'd stumbled into. But Lena had learned something on that mountain during those hours when she'd been certain she was going to die. She'd learned that sometimes the smart choice and the right choice weren't the same thing. And she'd learned that when someone offers you a hand in the darkness, you take it. She reached for her phone, pulled up her lawyer's number. Time to start fighting back. The conversation with Danny went better than Ethan had expected, and worse in ways he hadn't anticipated. His son listened quietly while Ethan explained that the woman he'd rescued from the fire needed a safe place to stay for a while, that there were people who might try to hurt her, that having her at the house meant being extra careful about security. Is she nice? Danny asked when Ethan finished. I think so. I don't know her very well yet. But you saved her life. I did. Danny considered this carefully, his face serious in a way that made him look older than 8. Mom used to say that when you save someone's life, you're responsible for them. Like, you have to make sure the saving part sticks. Ethan felt his throat tighten. She did say that. Where'd you remember that from? When we found that bird with the broken wing. You wanted to leave it because you said nature had to take its course. But Mom said once we'd seen it, once we knew it needed help, we were responsible for making sure it got better. Danny looked up at his father. So if you saved Lena, you have to make sure she stays safe now, right? Right. Then she should definitely stay here. We have the guest room, and I can be quiet when she needs to rest. And Mrs. Chen makes really good soup that helps people feel better. Ethan pulled his son into a hug, overwhelmed by the simple generosity of children who hadn't yet learned to complicate kindness with fear. You're a good kid, you know that? I know. Danny's voice was muffled against Ethan's shoulder. Can I ask her about being a surveyor? I want to know how you measure mountains. I think she'd like that. That night, after Danny was asleep, Ethan stood in the doorway of the guest room and took inventory. The space was small but comfortable, with a double bed, a dresser, and a window that overlooked the backyard. Claire's books still lined the shelf against the wall, romance novels and mysteries she'd loved, that Ethan hadn't been able to part with even 3 years later. He should probably move those before Lena arrived, give her space that felt like hers rather than a shrine to someone else's life. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the memory of Claire bringing home strays and strangers, filling their house with people who needed safe harbor. Maybe it was the sense that his wife would have approved of this decision, would have welcomed Lena without hesitation. Or maybe it was just that letting go of Claire's things felt too much like letting go of Claire herself, and he wasn't ready for that. Might never be ready. His phone rang. Tom Morrison's number. We have a problem, Tom said without preamble. One of Hale's employees just contacted me. Project manager named David Reeves says he has information about the boundary fraud and wants to make a deal. Ethan felt adrenaline spike. What kind of information? He wouldn't say over the phone, wants to meet in person, somewhere public. Tomorrow at noon, the diner on Route 7. That's fast. Yesterday we had nothing. Now suddenly someone's coming forward? I know. Could be legitimate. Could be a setup. Could be someone Hale is using to figure out what we know. Tom's voice was grim. Which is why I want you there as backup. Me? I'm not law enforcement. No, but you're someone Hale doesn't know is involved yet. You can sit at a separate table, watch the room, call for help if things go sideways. Chen will be there too, in her car outside. We're taking this seriously, but we're also being careful. Ethan thought about Lena, about the promise he'd made to face this together. What time should I pick up Lena from the hospital? After the meeting. If this goes well, if Reeves really does have information we can use, we might need her there to verify technical details, but I don't want her anywhere near this until we know it's safe. Understood. Noon at the diner. I'll be there. After hanging up, Ethan checked the locks on all the doors, made sure the security system was armed, looked in on Danny one more time. Everything was quiet, peaceful, normal. The kind of night that should have let him sleep easily. But he lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling and wondering what he'd gotten himself and his son into. Wondering if courage and doing the right thing were really enough when facing someone with Marcus Hale's resources and ruthlessness. Wondering if he'd made a terrible mistake. And underneath all of that, a small voice that sounded suspiciously like Claire's, reminding him that fear was just another form of calculation. That sometimes you had to ignore the math and trust that being on the right side of truth mattered more than being on the safe side of probability. He finally fell asleep around 3 a.m. and dreamed of fire and falling and a voice counting steps in the darkness. The diner on Route 7 was the kind of place that had been serving the same menu since 1987 and saw no reason to change. Red vinyl booths, checkered floor tiles, a counter where locals gathered for coffee, and gossip that spread faster than any social media network could manage. Ethan arrived 15 minutes early, took a booth near the back with clear sight lines to both entrances, and ordered coffee he didn't drink. Tom was already there, sitting at the counter in civilian clothes, looking every bit like a man grabbing lunch on his day off. Through the window, Ethan could see Chen's unmarked sedan in the parking lot, positioned to watch everyone who came and went. At 11:58, David Reeves walked in. He was younger than Ethan expected, maybe 35, with the kind of neat appearance that spoke of corporate ambitions and careful image management. Pressed khakis, button-down shirt, wedding ring that caught the fluorescent lights. He scanned the diner nervously, spotted Tom at the counter, and headed that direction. Ethan watched the interaction from his booth, noting the way Reeves kept glancing at the door, the way his hands trembled slightly when he shook Tom's hand. Either the man was genuinely scared, or he was a very good actor. Tom led Reeves to a booth on the opposite side of the diner, far enough from Ethan to maintain plausible deniability, but close enough that Ethan could hear fragments of their conversation when the lunch crowd noise ebbed. A waitress brought them menus, coffee, the kind of casual service that suggested nothing unusual was happening. "I appreciate you meeting me," Reeves said, his voice low but carrying. "I wasn't sure if I should reach out, but after what happened to that surveyor, after the fire..." He stopped, took a breath. "I couldn't stay quiet anymore." Tom's response was too quiet for Ethan to hear, but Reeves nodded and continued. "I've been with Pinnacle Mountain Development for 6 years, started as an assistant project manager, worked my way up. The Ridgeline Vista project was supposed to be my big break, my chance to run a major development from start to finish." His laugh was bitter. "Turns out, it was also my chance to become an accessory to fraud." Ethan's coffee cup paused halfway to his lips. This was it. This was the connection they needed. Last March, Mr. Hale called me into his office. Said there was a problem with the ridgeline boundaries, that the protected forest designation was eating into our profit margins. He asked if there was a way to reconfigure the property lines to maximize developable land. Reeves's hands clenched around his coffee mug. I told him it wasn't possible without violating environmental protections. He said to find a way to make it possible. "Did he specifically tell you to move the boundary markers?" Tom asked. "Not in those words. He's too smart for that. Art. But he made it clear what he expected, and he made it equally clear that my job depended on delivering results." Reeves pulled out his phone, started scrolling through something. "I have emails, instructions to hire a private surveying crew, specifications for relocating the markers, approval for payments that were listed as routine boundary maintenance but totaled over $200,000. Ethan saw Tom lean forward, saw the controlled excitement on the sheriff's face. This was better than they'd hoped. Direct evidence, documentation, a paper trail that led straight to Hale. "Why are you coming forward now?" Tom asked. Reeves was quiet for a moment. "My wife is pregnant. We found out last month. And I keep thinking about the kind of world I'm bringing this kid into, the kind of example I'm setting." He looked up at Tom, and his eyes were haunted. "When I saw the news about the fire, about that surveyor who almost died, I realized someone had tried to kill her because she found what I'd helped hide. And I thought about my kid asking me someday what I did when I knew something was wrong. I didn't want the answer to be that I stayed quiet." "You understand what coming forward means?" Tom's voice was gentle but firm. "Hale will destroy your career. He'll sue you for breach of contract, defamation, anything his lawyers can think of. You'll probably lose your job, possibly face criminal charges yourself depending on how deeply you were involved." "I know. My lawyer says I'm insane. My wife is terrified, but I can't live with this anymore." Reeves slid his phone across the table. "Everything's there. Emails, financial records, text messages between Hale and his surveying crew. Enough to prove he knew exactly what was happening and ordered it personally." Ethan watched Tom photograph the phone screen, documenting the evidence with methodical precision. This was it. This was the breakthrough that would bring Hale down, that would vindicate Lena and stop the development and prove that truth still mattered more than money. That's when the diner's door opened and two men in expensive suits walked in. Ethan recognized the type immediately. Corporate lawyers, the kind who showed up to deliver bad news with legal precision and zero empathy. They scanned the diner, spotted Reeves at the booth with Tom, and headed straight for them. "Mr. Reeves," the taller one said, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet diner, "we need you to come with us. Mr. Hale would like to speak with you about some concerning allegations that have come to his attention." Reeves had gone pale, his eyes darting between the lawyers and Tom. "I don't have to go anywhere with you." "Actually, you do. Your employment contract includes a clause requiring immediate availability for consultation regarding company business. This qualifies." The lawyer placed a document on the table. "We also have a cease and desist order preventing you from sharing any proprietary company information with unauthorized parties. That includes law enforcement without a valid subpoena." Tom stood slowly, his hand moving to his badge. "Sheriff Tom Morrison. Mr. Reeves is voluntarily providing information relevant to an ongoing investigation. You have no authority to interfere." "We're not interfering, Sheriff. We're simply reminding Mr. Reeves of his contractual and legal obligations." The second lawyer, shorter but somehow more menacing, smiled coldly. "Any information he shared with you was obtained under false pretenses and is therefore inadmissible. Our firm will be filing motions to suppress any evidence derived from this conversation." Ethan saw the trap closing. Hale had known about the meeting, had probably known about it before Reeves had even called Tom. Had let his employee make contact, let him provide evidence, then swooped in to invalidate everything through legal maneuvering. "David," the tall lawyer said, his voice almost kind, "you need to think about your family. Your wife, your child on the way. Mr. Hale is willing to be generous if you reconsider this course of action. Full salary during paternity leave, promotion to senior project manager, a very comfortable severance package if you decide corporate life isn't for you anymore. All he asks is that you remember your obligations to the company that's employed you for 6 years." It was a masterclass in manipulation. The threat wrapped in concern, the bribe disguised as generosity, the reminder that Reeves had everything to lose and nothing to gain by continuing. Reeves looked at Tom, and Ethan could see the man breaking, could see the fear for his pregnant wife, for his unborn child, for the comfortable life that was being dangled just out of reach, could see the moment when courage gave way to survival instinct. "I'm sorry," Reeves whispered. "I can't. My family, I can't." He stood, took his phone back from the table, and walked out with the lawyers flanking him like prison guards. The door swung shut behind them, and the diner slowly returned to its normal rhythm of conversation and clinking silverware. Tom sat back down heavily, his expression grim. Ethan abandoned his booth and slid in across from the sheriff. "How did they know?" Ethan asked quietly. "Either Reeves told someone, or Hale has been monitoring his communications, or we have a leak somewhere in the investigation. Tom's jaw was tight with frustration. Either way, we just lost our best witness and any evidence he might have provided. What about the photos you took of his phone? Inadmissible without Reeves's testimony to authenticate them. Hale's lawyers will argue they're fabricated, that we manipulated the images, that there's no chain of custody. Without Reeves willing to testify that those are his actual communications, they're worthless. Ethan felt anger building in his chest. So that's it. Hale just wins? He threatens someone's family and walks away clean? For now. Tom stood, threw money on the table for the coffee. But people like Reeves don't sleep well at night. The guilt eats at them. Give it time. Maybe he'll find his courage again. And if he doesn't? Tom didn't answer, which was answer enough. Ethan's phone buzzed, a text from the hospital. Lena's been discharged early. She's waiting in the lobby. He showed Tom the message. I need to go pick her up. Get her settled before... Before what? Before the next threat materialized? Before Hale decided to eliminate the problem more permanently? Go, Tom said. I'll call Chen, fill her in on what happened here. We'll regroup tonight, figure out our next move. We still have Lena's evidence. The photos, the GPS data, the satellite imagery. We do. But without someone on the inside willing to testify that Hale ordered the fraud, we can't connect him to it. Best case, we shut down the development, force a new survey. Worst case, Hale's lawyers tie this up in court for years while he develops the land anyway, and pays whatever fines eventually come down. Tom's expression was bleak. I'm sorry, Ethan. I thought we had him. The drive to the hospital took 20 minutes, and Ethan spent it trying to figure out how to explain to Lena that their best lead had just evaporated. That the man who'd tried to kill her was still free, still powerful, still protected by money and lawyers and fear. She was waiting outside the main entrance, seated in a wheelchair per hospital policy despite her protests, her casted leg propped up awkwardly. Someone had brought her clean clothes, dark jeans with one leg cut to accommodate the cast, a simple blue sweater, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She looked tired but determined, and when she saw Ethan pull up, relief flooded her face. Please tell me you're here to rescue me from the cheerful prison that is modern healthcare, she said as he helped her into the truck. Something like that. He stowed the wheelchair, slid behind the wheel. How are you feeling? Like someone dropped a tree on my leg and then made me run a marathon. The usual. She studied his face as he pulled out of the parking lot. Something happened. I can see it in your expression. So he told her. About Reeves, about the meeting, about the lawyers and the threats, and the moment when their witness chose safety over truth. Lena listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with each detail. He chose his family, she said finally. I can't blame him for that. I can. We all have families, things to protect, but at some point, you have to decide what kind of world you want them living in. One where people like Hale can do whatever they want because everyone's too scared to stop them, or one where truth actually matters. Easy to say when you're not the one pregnant and facing financial ruin. Maybe, but Claire used to say that the right choice is usually the hard one, that if it was easy, it wouldn't require courage. Lena was quiet as they drove through town, watching the familiar streets pass by. Where are we going? My house. Get you settled in the guest room, introduce you to Danny, probably subject you to Mrs. Chen's well-meaning but relentless hospitality. He glanced at her. Unless you've changed your mind about staying. Have you changed your mind about the offer? No. Then I haven't either. She adjusted her casted leg, wincing. Though I should warn you, I'm a terrible house guest. I work odd hours. I talk to myself when I'm thinking through problems, and I have strong opinions about proper coffee preparation. Danny works odd hours because he's 8, and sleep is negotiable in his mind. I talk to myself constantly because it's the only way to have an intelligent conversation some days, and we have a French press that Claire insisted on. I think we'll manage. The house looked exactly as Ethan had left it that morning, small, neat, nestled in a neighborhood of similar homes with well-maintained yards and American flags on the porches. Mrs. Chen was waiting on her front step, watching their arrival with the focused attention of someone who'd appointed herself neighborhood security. You must be Lena, she called as Ethan helped Lena out of the truck. Ethan told me you'd be staying. I made soup. Of course you did. Ethan muttered, but he was smiling. Getting Lena inside took coordination. The crutches the hospital had provided were new and awkward, and the 3 steps up to the front door might as well have been a mountain. Mrs. Chen appeared with a wheelchair she'd borrowed from somewhere, and between the 2 of them, they got Lena settled in the living room. "Danny's at school until 3, Ethan explained. "I'll pick him up, bring him home for introductions. Meanwhile, the guest room is down the hall, bathroom is next to it, kitchen's stocked, TV remote is on the coffee table, and if you need anything, Mrs. Chen is approximately 40 feet away and has a key." "I'm not an invalid," Lena protested. "No, but you did just get out of the hospital with a broken ankle, and I'd rather not explain to your doctor why you fell and broke something else on my watch." He grabbed a glass of water from the kitchen, set it within easy reach. "Rest. We'll figure out everything else later." But Lena was already pulling out her phone, her expression shifting into the focused intensity he'd seen in the hospital. "I need internet access, and if you have a laptop I can borrow, that would help." "What are you doing?" "What I should have done before filing that preliminary report. I'm going to find out exactly who Marcus Hale is, how his organization works, and where he's vulnerable." She looked up at Ethan. "Reeves might have been our best shot at connecting Hale to the fraud, but he wasn't our only shot. There are always patterns, always trails that people leave behind. I just need to find them." "Lena, the investigators are already doing that. You should rest, recover." "I'll rest when Hale is in handcuffs. Until then, I have time, internet access, and a very personal motivation to dig deep." Her smile was sharp. "Besides, I'm a surveyor. Finding things that don't want to be found is literally what I do." Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to insist she take time to heal physically and emotionally before diving back into the investigation. But he recognized that look in her eyes, had seen it in the mirror often enough. It was the look of someone who'd been knocked down and was choosing to get back up swinging. "Laptop's in my bedroom. Wi-Fi password is taped to the router in the kitchen." "And Lena?" He paused at the door. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up. For fighting back. For being exactly the kind of stubborn that might actually beat someone like Hale." She laughed, the sound genuine despite everything. "You say stubborn, I say appropriately persistent. Claire would have liked you." The words surprised them both. Ethan hadn't meant to say them, hadn't even realized he was thinking them until they were out, but they were true. Claire, who'd collected strays and fought injustice with the same fierce determination, who'd seen the world not as it was, but as it should be, and worked relentlessly to close that gap, she would have absolutely liked Lena Parker. "I wish I could have met her," Lena said softly. "Yeah, me too." The afternoon passed in a strange domesticity that felt both comfortable and surreal. Ethan picked up Danny from school, endured his son's excited questioning about their house guest, and returned home to find Lena exactly where he'd left her, now surrounded by printed documents and handwritten notes that covered every surface of the coffee table. "This is Lena," Ethan said, ushering Danny into the living room. "Lena, this is Danny. Please excuse anything he says for the next 5 minutes because he has zero filter when he's excited." "Hi." Danny approached with the fearless curiosity of children who haven't yet learned to be wary of strangers. "Dad says you're a surveyor. Do you get to use lasers? Can you really measure a whole mountain? Why do they call them boundary markers if they're just metal things in rocks? Did it hurt when the tree fell on you?" Lena blinked, clearly overwhelmed by the rapid-fire questions, then laughed. "Yes, sometimes, yes, with the right equipment, because that's what they mark. And very much yes." "Cool." Danny settled on the floor beside the coffee table, examining her notes. "What are all these papers?" "Research. I'm trying to find information about someone who did some bad things so we can prove he did them and make sure he can't do them again." "Like a detective?" "Something like that." Danny considered this seriously. "My mom used to say that bad guys only win if good people get too tired to fight. Are you tired?" Lena met Ethan's eyes over his son's head, and something passed between them, understanding, solidarity, the recognition of shared purpose. "Not even a little bit," she said. That evening, after Danny had been fed, bathed, and reluctantly convinced that bedtime was non-negotiable, Ethan found Lena still working in the living room. She'd moved to the couch, her casted leg propped on pillows, the laptop balanced on her knees. "Find anything?" he asked, settling into the chair across from her. "Maybe." Hale's development company has been involved in 7 major projects over the past decade. 4 of them involved land that was previously protected or restricted in some way. 3 of those 4 had the restrictions lifted or boundaries changed in the months before Hale purchased the property. That's a pattern. That's a pattern that suggests either Hale is incredibly lucky or he's been systematically manipulating land classifications for years. She turned the laptop so he could see the screen, showing a timeline with color-coded markers. What's interesting is the people involved. Same county administrator approving the changes. Same law firm handling the transactions. Same environmental consulting company certifying that the land was suitable for development. You think they're all in on it? I think Hale has built a network of people who benefit from looking the other way. The county administrator gets generous campaign contributions. The law firm gets lucrative retainer agreements. The consulting company gets ongoing contracts. Lena pulled up another document. What I need to find is the one person in this network who got less than they expected, or who has a reason to resent Hale, or who kept records that could expose the whole operation. Ethan leaned forward, studying the web of connections she'd mapped. That's going to take time. I have time. And more importantly, I have nothing else to do while I'm stuck in this cast except watch daytime television, which I'm pretty sure is designed to drive people insane. You could rest, actually recover. I'll rest when this is over. She closed the laptop, rubbed her eyes. Ethan, can I ask you something personal? Depends on how personal. Why are you really doing this? And don't tell me it's about teaching Danny or honoring Claire's memory. Those are true, but they're not all of it. He was quiet for a long moment, trying to find words for something he'd barely articulated to himself. When Claire was sick, I felt helpless. Watching her fight this thing I couldn't protect her from, couldn't fix, couldn't even understand most of the time. The doctors would use all this medical terminology, throw around statistics and treatment options, and I'd just sit there nodding like I had any idea what they were talking about. You were trying to support her. I was trying to survive it, and when she died, when it was finally over, I realized I'd spent 2 years being reactive instead of active, letting things happen to us instead of fighting back. He met Lena's eyes. This thing with you, with Hale, with the fire, it's something I can actually do something about, someone I can actually help. And maybe that's selfish. Maybe I need this as much as you do, but I can't walk away from it. It's not selfish, Lena said quietly. It's human. We all need to feel like we matter, like our actions have consequences beyond just surviving another day. What about you? Why keep fighting when it would be easier to let it go? Take whatever settlement Hale's lawyers eventually offer, rebuild somewhere else. She was quiet so long he thought she might not answer. Then, because I'm good at what I do, really good, and I can't let someone destroy my reputation based on lies without fighting back. But also, she paused, searching for words. When I was trapped under that tree, when I'd accepted that I was going to die, I kept thinking about all the things I'd been too cautious to try, relationships I'd avoided because they seemed complicated, risks I didn't take because the math didn't work, a whole life lived inside safe boundaries. And now? Now I'm living with a stranger and his son, investigating a powerful man who wants me dead, fighting a battle that any sane person would walk away from. Her smile was wry. Turns out nearly dying gives you a different perspective on risk assessment. Before Ethan could respond, his phone buzzed, Tom's name on the screen. "We have a problem," the sheriff said without preamble. "David Reeves was just found dead in his car. Apparent suicide, single gunshot wound to the head, weapon in his hand, note on the passenger seat." Ethan felt ice flood his veins. Apparent suicide. His wife said he'd been depressed, stressed about work. The note mentions guilt over professional failures, fear about being able to provide for his family. Tom's voice was heavy. "It's being ruled a suicide pending the full investigation, but Ethan..." But he was fine this morning, scared but determined, ready to do the right thing. "I know, and now he's dead, and every piece of evidence he might have provided dies with him." A long pause. Watch your back. And keep Lena safe, because whoever is cleaning up Hale's problems just proved they're willing to kill to do it. The call ended. Ethan sat in the sudden silence of his living room trying to process the implications. Reeves had been scared enough to reach out, brave enough to meet with law enforcement, and within hours of Hale's lawyers getting to him, he was dead. The message was clear. Cooperation meant death. "What happened?" Lena asked, reading his expression. He told her, watched her face go pale, watched her hands start to shake before she clenched them into fists to make it stop. "They killed him," she whispered, "to silence him, to send a message. We don't know that for sure." "Don't we?" She stood awkwardly, balancing on her good leg and one crutch. A man contacts law enforcement about fraud, gets confronted by his employer's lawyers, and dies of an apparent suicide hours later. What are the odds that's actually suicide? Low, but we can't prove anything else. Which is exactly the point. Lena moved to the window, stared out at the quiet street. Hale doesn't just have money and lawyers. He has the ability and willingness to kill people who threaten him, and I'm next on that list. Ethan moved to stand beside her, following her gaze to the peaceful suburban scene outside. Somewhere out there, someone was watching, waiting, calculating the best way to eliminate another problem. The thought should have terrified him. Maybe it did. But it also crystallized something in his mind, something that had been building since the moment he decided to carry Lena off that mountain. "Then we make sure you're not an easy target," he said quietly. "We keep you safe, we keep investigating, and we find the evidence that brings Hale down before he can get to you." "That's a nice plan? How do we actually execute it?" "Carefully, methodically, and with the understanding that we're now playing against someone who's already killed at least once to protect his secrets." He turned to face her. "Lena, if you want to walk away from this, if you want to disappear somewhere Hale can't find you, I'll help you do it. No judgment, no questions. Your safety matters more than any case." She looked at him for a long moment, and he saw the fear there, saw the very rational desire to run and hide and let someone else fight this battle. But he also saw something else, something that reminded him of the woman who'd counted his steps even as she was losing consciousness, who'd calculated her own death with precision and then refused to accept it. "David Reeves died because someone decided he was disposable," Lena said. "I'm not going to let that death be meaningless. We're going to find the evidence, build the case, and make sure Hale pays for every life he's destroyed." Her voice was steady, certain. "And we're going to do it together, because that's what you do when someone offers you a hand in the darkness. You hold on, and you don't let go." Ethan nodded, feeling something settle in his chest. A decision made, a line crossed, a commitment that couldn't be taken back. "Together," he agreed. Outside, the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that looked almost like fire. And somewhere in the darkness that followed, Marcus Hale's network of corruption and violence continued its work, unaware that the two people who'd survived his first attempt to silence them had just decided to become his worst nightmare. The breakthrough came 3 weeks later, not from dramatic investigation or dangerous confrontation, but from a 19-year-old college student named Amy Chen who worked part-time as a barista at the coffee shop where Marcus Hale held his morning meetings. Lena found her by accident, scrolling through social media posts tagged at locations near Hale's office building, looking for patterns in his schedule. Amy had posted a photo of an elaborate latte with the caption, "When your customer leaves behind a whole meeting's worth of documents and you spend your break reading about corporate fraud like it's a thriller novel." The post was 2 days old and had 7 likes. Lena stared at it for a full minute before calling Tom Morrison. "I think I found something," she said when he answered. "Or someone, a barista who might have accidentally collected evidence." Tom arrived at Ethan's house within the hour, Chen right behind him. They sat around the kitchen table while Lena explained, pulling up Amy's social media profile on her borrowed laptop. "She works at the Mountainside Cafe," Lena said. "According to her post, she's a business major at the community college, works mornings before class. Hale meets there every Tuesday and Thursday at 7 a.m. with various members of his team." "And she kept documents he left behind?" Chen leaned forward, studying the screen. "That's either very smart or very dangerous. According to her most recent post from this morning, she's been collecting them for 3 months, Thought they might be useful for a business ethics class she's taking. Lena pulled up another photo, this one showing a stack of papers with corporate letterhead visible. She has no idea what she's sitting on. Or she's bait, Tom said quietly. Hale finds out some college kid has been collecting his documents, plants something incriminating, waits to see who comes looking. It's possible, Lena admitted. But look at her profile. She's real. 3 years of posts, hundreds of photos with friends and family, completely normal college student life. If this is a setup, it's incredibly elaborate. Ethan, who'd been listening from his position by the stove where he was making coffee, spoke up. So we approach her carefully. Feel her out. See if she's legitimate before we reveal why we're interested. We don't approach her at all, Chen said firmly. If this is real, the moment we make contact, we put her at risk. And if it's a trap, we walk right into it. Then what do you suggest? Lena's frustration was evident. We finally have a potential lead, and we just ignore it? We investigate her first, quietly. Make sure she's who she says she is, that her story checks out, that approaching her won't get her killed like Reeves. Tom pulled out his phone, started typing. Give me 24 hours to run a background check, talk to some people at the college, verify she's not connected to Hale in any way. And if she checks out, then we figure out the safest way to make contact and get those documents without painting a target on her back. The conversation was interrupted by Danny appearing in the kitchen doorway, backpack slung over one shoulder, looking between the adults with the uncanny perception kids develop when grown-ups are trying to hide things. Is everything okay? He asked. Everything's fine, buddy, Ethan said, immediately shifting into dad mode. Just talking about some work stuff. You finish your homework? Yes. Can Lena help me with my math? She's really good at explaining angles and measurements. Over the past 3 weeks, Danny and Lena had developed an easy rapport that surprised Ethan with its naturalness. She helped with homework, listened to his endless questions about how things worked, and treated him like a small adult rather than a child who needed protecting from reality. In return, Danny had appointed himself her recovery assistant, bringing her water and snacks, making sure her crutches were always within reach, and providing cheerful commentary on everything from morning cartoons to the proper construction of sandwiches. Go get your homework, Lena said, smiling at Danny despite the tension that had filled the kitchen moments before. We'll tackle those geometry problems together. After Danny had retrieved his math book and settled at the table with Lena, the adults moved into the living room to continue their conversation in lower voices. 24 hours, Tom confirmed. I'll contact you as soon as I know anything. Meanwhile, everyone stays alert. Reeves's death is still being investigated as a suicide, but I'm not the only one who thinks the timing was suspicious. There's pressure building, questions being asked. Hale knows people are looking at him. Which makes him more dangerous, Chen added. Cornered animals are unpredictable. If he thinks we're getting close, he might do something desperate. After Tom and Chen left, Ethan found himself alone in the kitchen while Lena helped Danny with homework in the dining room. Their voices drifted through the doorway, Lena's patient explanations punctuated by Danny's occasional, "Oh, I get it now," moments of understanding. Mrs. Chen appeared at the back door, letting herself in with the key Ethan had given her years ago. She carried a casserole dish that smelled like heaven. "Chicken and rice," she announced, setting it on the counter. "And before you say I don't need to keep feeding you, I'm going to remind you that cooking for 2 extra people is actually easier than cooking for 1, so you're doing me a favor." "Pretty sure that's not how it works, Lynn." "Pretty sure I don't care." She pulled off her coat, started rummaging in Ethan's cabinets for plates. How is she really doing? Not the polite answer she gives when people ask. The real answer. Ethan glanced toward the dining room where Lena's laugh at something Danny said carried clearly. Stronger than she should be, more scared than she admits, determined to see this through even though every logical part of her brain is screaming to run. Sounds familiar? Mrs. Chen gave him a knowing look. You had that same expression when Claire was sick, that look of someone who knows the odds are bad but refuses to accept them anyway. This is different. Is it? You're fighting something bigger than you, risking everything for someone you barely know, ignoring the sensible choice because it's not the right choice. She started serving the casserole. Only difference I can see is that this time you have a chance of winning. What if we don't? What if we push this and Hale comes after us? After Danny? Mrs. Chen set down the serving spoon, turned to face him fully. Ethan, listen to me. I've known you since you moved into this neighborhood 10 years ago. Watched you build a life with Claire. Watched you survive losing her. Watched you raise that beautiful boy into someone who knows kindness and courage aren't weaknesses. And in all that time, I've never seen you back down from doing what's right just because it was hard. I had less to lose then. No, you had Claire, the most precious thing in your world. And you still opened your home to people who needed help, still volunteered for rescues that could have gotten you killed, still taught Danny that safety isn't the same as hiding. She squeezed his arm. Don't change who you are because you're afraid. Fear is just another form of loss, and you've already survived the worst loss there is. Dinner that night was surprisingly normal. Danny chattered about school, about his friend Marcus, who'd brought a frog to class, about the science fair project he wanted to build that somehow involved rockets and probably violated several safety regulations. Lena contributed stories about surveying mishaps, about the time she'd fallen into a creek trying to measure a boundary marker, about professors in college who'd insisted land surveying was a dying profession, right up until GPS made it more relevant than ever. Ethan watched them interact, struck by how easily Lena had integrated into their small family unit, how natural it felt to have her at the table, how right it seemed when Danny asked her opinion on whether robots or dinosaurs would win in a fight, and she took the question with complete seriousness. After Danny was in bed, after the dishes were done and the house was quiet, Lena and Ethan sat on the back porch despite the evening chill. The mountains were dark shapes against a darker sky, and somewhere up there, the burned scar from the wildfire was slowly beginning to heal. Thank you, Lena said quietly, for letting me be part of this. Your life with Danny. I know it's complicated, having a stranger in your home. You're not a stranger anymore, haven't been for weeks. What am I then? Ethan considered the question carefully. Someone who counts steps when the world is burning. Someone who does the math and then ignores it when the numbers don't account for what matters. Someone who's teaching my son that courage looks different on everyone but feels the same. That's a lot of weight to put on a surveyor with a broken ankle. You're more than that, we both know it. She was quiet for a moment. When this is over, when Hale is dealt with one way or another, what happens then? Do I just go back to my old life, or find a new job in a different county, pretend the past month didn't happen? Do you want to? I don't know what I want anymore. A month ago, my life was organized, predictable, safe. Now it's none of those things, and somehow I'm happier than I've been in years. She laughed softly. How does that make any sense? Claire used to say that safety is overrated, that the things worth having are usually the things that scare us the most. Ethan met her eyes. I think she'd like how complicated you've made my life. Complicated is one word for it. What's another? Better, Lena said simply. You and Danny, this house, even Mrs. Chen's relentless feeding campaign. It's better than safe. It's real. Whatever Ethan might have said next was interrupted by his phone ringing. Tom's name on the screen calling at 10 p.m., which meant either very good news or very bad news. She's clean, Tom said immediately. Amy Chen, no relation to your neighbor, 19 years old, business major with a 3.8 GPA, works at the cafe to pay tuition. No connection to Hale or his companies, no suspicious activity in her background. She's exactly who she appears to be. So we can approach her? Carefully. I'll make first contact tomorrow morning, explain the situation, see if she's willing to cooperate. If she agrees, we'll arrange a safe exchange of the documents she's collected. A pause. Ethan, if this works, if those documents contain what we think they might, this could be the evidence we need to bring Hale down. Real documented proof of fraud directly from his own meetings. After hanging up, Ethan relayed the conversation to Lena. Her expression shifted from cautious hope to fierce determination. We're close, she said. After everything, we're actually close to ending this. Don't count on it yet. We still don't know what's in those documents, if they're even relevant to the boundary fraud. They will be. I can feel it. She stood carefully, balancing on her crutches. Hale got arrogant, started having meetings in public because he thought he was untouchable, and that arrogance is going to be his downfall. The next morning, Tom met with Amy Chen at the cafe during her shift. He called Ethan afterward with an update that sent hope surging through everyone involved. "She has everything," Tom said, barely containing his excitement. 3 months of documents, meeting notes, financial projections, communications between Hale and his surveying crew. She thought it was interesting reading, had no idea what she was actually looking at. When I explained the investigation, she went pale and immediately agreed to hand it all over. "When can we see them?" "I'm bringing them to your house now." Chen is already there with Lena, going through the preliminary pages. "Ethan, I think we have him. I really think we have him this time." The next few hours were a blur of documents and coffee and growing certainty. Spread across Ethan's dining room table were communications that laid out the entire fraud in meticulous detail. Hale ordering the boundary markers moved. Hale approving payments to the surveying crew. Hale coordinating with the county administrator to fast-track the boundary approval. Hale discussing strategies for dealing with anyone who might discover the fraud. And in one particularly damning email chain, Hale discussing Lena Parker by name, describing her as a potential problem that needed to be handled decisively before her survey results became public. "This is it," Chen breathed, photographing each page for evidence. "This connects him directly to the fraud, proves he ordered it, knew it was illegal, and actively worked to cover it up." "What about Reeves?" Lena asked, her voice tight. "Is there anything about him?" Tom found the email in a folder dated 2 days before Reeves died. Subject line, "Problem resolution." The message was coded but clear enough. Hale instructing someone to ensure David Reeves understands the consequences of disloyalty and to make certain the problem doesn't persist beyond this week. The room went silent. They were looking at what amounted to a murder confession, buried in corporate language but unmistakable in its intent. "We need to move fast," Tom said. "Once we file charges, Hale's going to lawyer up, probably flee the state. We have maybe a 24-hour window to act." Chen was already on her phone, coordinating with the state attorney general's office. Within an hour, arrest warrants were being prepared. By evening, state investigators were raiding Hale's office and home, seizing computers and files and freezing assets. Ethan watched the news coverage with Lena beside him on the couch, Danny between them asking questions faster than either adult could answer them. The story dominated every local channel. Marcus Hale, prominent developer and former state senator, arrested on charges of fraud, corruption, and conspiracy to commit murder. The evidence was overwhelming, the case airtight. "It's over," Lena whispered, and Ethan heard the disbelief in her voice. "It's actually over." But it wasn't, not quite. The trial took 4 months. Lena testified 3 times, walking the jury through her survey findings with the same precision she'd used to document them. Amy Chen testified about the documents she'd collected, about the meetings she'd witnessed. The county administrator, facing charges himself, turned state's witness and provided testimony about the entire network of corruption Hale had built over 15 years. Ethan sat in the courtroom gallery for every day of testimony, watching Lena face down Hale's attorneys with the same courage she'd shown on the mountain. Watching her refuse to be intimidated, refuse to back down, refuse to let them paint her as anything other than a professional who'd done her job correctly and paid a terrible price for it. The verdict came on a Thursday afternoon in late spring. Guilty on all counts. Hale was led away in handcuffs, his expression finally showing the fear his victims had lived with for years. The Ridgeline Vista development was permanently halted. The fraudulently obtained land returned to protected status. The county administrator resigned. 3 lawyers were disbarred, and the entire network of corruption Hale had built came crashing down. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed Lena with questions. She kept her answers brief and professional, deflecting credit to the investigators and prosecutors who'd built the case. But when one reporter asked how it felt to have survived someone trying to kill her and then successfully brought them to justice, her answer was simple. "It feels like the math finally worked out right." That evening, Ethan's house was full of people celebrating. Tom and Chen, Mrs. Chen with enough food to feed everyone twice over, Danny racing around with the excitement that came from sensing the adults were genuinely happy for the first time in months. Amy Chen had been invited too, still slightly overwhelmed by her accidental role in bringing down a criminal empire. Lena stood near the back porch, watching the celebration with a smile that didn't quite hide the exhaustion underneath. Her cast had been removed 2 weeks earlier, but she still favored her left leg slightly, a reminder of everything that had brought them to this moment. Ethan found her there as the sun was setting, painting the mountains in gold and orange that no longer looked like fire. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm trying to figure out what happens next. I've spent 4 months focused on the trial, on justice, on making sure Hale paid for what he did. Now that it's over, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do with myself." "The county offered you your job back. Full reinstatement, back pay, official apology." "They did. And I told them I'd think about it." She turned to face him. "But I'm not sure I want to go back to that life, to being the person I was before the fire." "Who do you want to be?" "I don't know yet. Someone who counts steps with other people instead of walking alone. Someone who does the math but also believes in miracles. Someone who has a family that isn't just a career in an empty apartment." She smiled, vulnerable and hopeful. "Someone who belongs here, if you'll have me." Ethan felt something warm bloom in his chest, something that had been growing slowly over 4 months of shared meals and late-night conversations, and watching her help Danny with homework, something that felt like hope and possibility, and the beginning of something he'd thought he'd never have again. "Danny asked me last week if you were going to stay forever," he said. "When I asked him what he thought about that, he said it would be cool because then he'd have someone to help with math, and someone who understood about missing people you love but being okay anyway." "What did you say?" "I said I'd have to ask you, because staying isn't something you decide for someone else. It's a choice you make together. And if I choose to stay, then we figure out what that looks like. How to make space for each other without forgetting the people we've lost. How to build something new that honors what we've survived." He took her hand, felt her fingers intertwine with his. How to be a family that includes scars and courage and the occasional wildfire rescue. Lena laughed, the sound genuine and bright. "That's a pretty specific family description." "We're a pretty specific family." Inside, someone had turned on music. Danny's voice carried through the open door, demanding that everyone come see the cake Mrs. Chen had made that was decorated to look like a mountain. Celebration and community, and the kind of joy that comes from surviving something terrible together. "I choose to stay," Lena said quietly. "If the offer's still open." "It's open. It's been open since the moment I decided to walk into that fire instead of away from it. That was a terrible decision from a risk assessment standpoint. Best terrible decision I ever made." She kissed him then, soft and careful and full of promise. When they pulled apart, Danny was standing in the doorway watching them with the knowing expression of children who see more than adults give them credit for. "Does this mean Lena's staying?" he asked. "If that's okay with you," Lena said. Danny considered this seriously for exactly 3 seconds. "Cool. Can you help me build a rocket for the science fair? Dad's good at a lot of things, but rockets aren't one of them." "I'm standing right here," Ethan protested. "Sorry, Dad, but it's true." Danny grabbed Lena's hand. "Come on, Mrs. Chen is cutting the cake and she made your favorite kind." As Danny pulled Lena back toward the celebration, she looked over her shoulder at Ethan with an expression that held wonder and gratitude and something deeper that neither of them was quite ready to name yet. He followed them inside, into the warm light and laughter, and the beginning of a future he was learning to stop calculating and start trusting. 6 months later, on a clear autumn morning, Ethan and Lena hiked up the Silver Ridge Trail together. The burned sections had started to recover, new growth pushing up through the ash, the forest slowly reclaiming what the fire had tried to take. They stopped at the spot where he'd found her, where the fallen tree had been cleared away, but the memory remained. "Sometimes I dream about this place," Lena said, looking around at the recovered forest. "About being trapped, about the smoke, about thinking I was going to die." "Are they nightmares?" "Not anymore. Now they're just memories. Reminders of the day my life split into before and after." She took his hand, and honestly, I like the after better. Danny, who'd insisted on coming along to see where his dad had done the coolest rescue ever, was examining a new growth pine with the focused intensity he brought to everything. "Dad, is it true that trees can live for hundreds of years?" "Some of them, yeah." "So this tree could still be here when I'm old?" "Probably." "Cool. Danny moved on to the next discovery, already asking about how fast mountains grew and whether you could measure the whole world if you had enough time. Lena laughed softly. He gets that from you, you know. The belief that impossible things are just things that haven't been solved yet. I learned it from watching you refuse to stay dead when the math said you should. We're quite a pair. Yeah, we really are. They stood there for a while longer, watching Danny explore the recovering forest, watching the sunlight filter through new growth, watching the mountain heal itself one season at a time. The fire had destroyed so much, had tried to erase truth and life and hope. But in the cleared ground, something lasting had grown. Something built not from safety or certainty or perfect calculations, but from courage and choice and the simple decision to walk towards someone who needed help instead of away. The mountain would always carry the scars of what had burned. So would they. But scars were just evidence of survival, proof that something terrible had been faced and overcome. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. As they started back down the trail together, Danny running ahead with endless questions, Lena leaned into Ethan's side and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders. And in that moment, the math finally worked perfectly. Two people who'd walked through fire. One boy who'd lost his mother and found a family. One truth that refused to burn. One choice that changed everything. The mountain stood witness to it all, patient and permanent, as the three of them headed home.